This episode, Touch It, You Own It. Both Larry and John have experienced following in after other contractors to finish jobs. We wanted to share our perspectives on this activity from both the homeowner and from the contractor. Welcome to the Handyman Pros radio show, home improvement and maintenance tips from the pros. Thanks for listening to another edition of the Handyman Pros radio show, where our goal is to help save you time, money, and aggravation on your home maintenance and repair. This edition is entitled, Touch It, You Own It. To help me explain, I'm here with my ever-cheerful co-host and old buddy, John. Johnny, we need to change the title of this show because Touch It, You Own It is and anyway, keep going.
Yeah. Well, I think what we wanted to talk about here, I wanted to address a couple of things. And what I'm seeing is this kind of thing coming up, this question, or I guess it is a question, not a concern as much as it is a question to a lot of other handymen or contractors out there, is this idea about fixing somebody else's work.
Yes. And I actually experienced this past week, which is part of the reason for the show. Yeah,
exactly, Larry. And that's what brought this up. After you and I had talked, I'm like, I put two and two together. Hey. And I said, I'm seeing the same thing popping up again and again. And so I wanted to, I kind of wanted to go through this on both sides. One is the homeowner side, and the other is on a contractor side.
Correct.
So, that you get a fair mix of how both sides are going to think here in this situation. So, one of the things, so let me just jump into this. A lot of folks out there might have contracted out work. And Larry, I'll let you go with your fence thing in a minute here, but I think, just to kind of set the stage, is that, the work was not done correctly. The homeowner might not have been satisfied with it. Something happened, and now you're in a situation where you have to call in somebody behind them to fix it.
Yes.
In that lies some delicate decision points of the job, what it entails, and if I attempt to fix it, you basically own it at that point.
Correct.
So go ahead with your story, Larry. But
well, yeah, and so this is and both you and I have experienced this in the past, where we get a call and we go to look at the job, or I always like to look at the job first, because I kind of want to have an idea of what I'm getting into, because when you come in behind somebody, along with the fact of that you're going to own it, you kind of want to know where the other contractor was. You kind of want to try to feel the customer out to understand what their points of concern are and all of that kind of thing. And in my case, it happened to be, I was instructed that it was going to be just repairing a couple of gates on a fence, which was fine. It's certainly well within my scope of ability to do the job. But this, not being negative, but this job just kind of, it didn't start off well to begin with, and just from the standpoint of, I get to the job site and the customer's actually not there, which is, of course, folks, I'm going to tell you as a homeowner, don't do that. That is really not a way to endear your contractor. If you've set an appointment with somebody, just like we tell contractors all the time, if you set an appointment with somebody, you need to be there, or you need to tell the contractor you can't make it for whatever reason. It doesn't matter, but there needs to be some communication there. Okay. So immediately I'm already, very much on the defensive. And, oh, by the way, I had contacted this customer earlier in the week, about 3 days before, saying, hey, we're on for Thursday morning. And the answer was yes. And so that started it off. In the process, I texted the customer, and they were on their way. which is fine. I really didn't have a big problem with that. But I go out and I start to look at the work that is on this particular fence. And folks, I worked for a fencing company when I was young. I really understand fencing and all of it. And the first thing that I noticed is this was a very, very large fence. Okay. I counted 22 panels just on one side of the fence wall, which at 22 times 8 is, it's basically 175 feet long. That's a lot of fence. And that's a job that I personally would not take. Okay. Because it's those days have passed for me. But that was only one side, by the way. That was only one side. So there were, obviously four sides to this fence. I was told there were only two gates. There were actually four gates. There were four gate sections and an additional gate at the rear of the property. So there were five total gate sections. So that was a miscommunication as well. Now I can understand the two gates in the front, but there were actually three gates in total if you want to look at the two gate sections as one whole gate. The other thing that I noticed straight away is that the contractor had not finished the top rail on the gate. He had actually cut the pieces and they were sitting down in the fence. And to me, as a contractor, that indicated that something was not right.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
Because he basically dropped it right
yeah,
there. I mean, he,
exactly.
he was on the verge of putting it up and he dropped it. So that was a bit of a red flag for me as well. And then the other side of it was I was looking at his work and I was saying this is actually excellent work. And folks, you've heard us espouse on this show many many times that when a contractor does good work, we I want to just tell the contract, I mean, if you do good work, keep going, dude. Like please do good work because we see too much work that isn't good. Most of the times when I'm called in, and I don't know about you, John, but when I'm called in behind the work of doing something behind somebody, it's usually just a freaking mess, right? I mean, that's my experience. I mean, it's just shoddy work. And so when I got to this site and realized that, then I was like, oh, this is, it's just already headed into a place that is not quite so good. And in this particular case, I passed on the job for a bunch of different reasons, but that was one of the reasons. The second was it actually was it was too much work for me at the present time. But that was probably the biggest reason why I turned it down, was it was just too much work. And then I didn't even get into the reasons why she terminated this other contractor, and she terminated him basically he probably had a day's worth of work left.
Yeah. Let me jump in here real quick.
Yep, yep.
So folks, let me unpack a couple of things that are on my mind right now, and that is, what Larry's saying here, is that number one, you've got folks out there doing great work.
Hmm.
And when Larry, that was a good, that's detective work. When the stuff is just dropped right there, it's like, every people just bugged out, and there must
Pretty
be a
much, yeah.
reason, right?
Right.
So I think there's a couple of things. I think on the, folks, if you're whether you're a homeowner or on the other side of this thing, you can be both at fault here. And if the contractor's getting a bad vibe that you might not be paying, you might not, hold your end of the bargain up, whatever that might be, in the point of construction of a project or whatever. People, these folks, rightly so, get nervous.
Yes. Because there's a lot of
There's a
money
lot of
involved
money.
here.
There's a lot of money and time there. Okay.
Right. Right.
Um, so I think there's two things that we'll talk about here, and that is, one is that the bad vibes coming from perhaps the person who's hiring the contractor, and then on the other side is bad work.
Right.
And the reason to kind of walk away in both these instances. So you go on with your story. I just wanted to jump in because I think what you're describing here is the first scenario is that this guy or girl got a bad vibe from the homeowner.
Yeah, I honestly don't know. I mean, I didn't I never did not talk to the contractor or anything like that. I don't really know. All I saw was the after the fact evidence of what, where we were at. And I even asked, I said, I didn't want to pry because I just wasn't going to get involved with the job because the title of this show is You Touch It, You Own It. And I was not wanting to do the
Exactly.
gate, and then own the whole project. Because I had nothing to do with the whole project. And it just ends up, for me, it ends up being a slippery slope that can cost me a lot of mental anguish, and a lot of things that
Yeah.
look, I like to own up to my own problems. If I do bad work or I buy bad materials, or I do whatever, and somebody's dissatisfied, great. I'm okay with that. I'll make amends. I'll do whatever I have to do, refund money if I have to, whatever, so forth and so on. But coming in behind, I do not want to inherit, especially a project this
Right.
big. I mean, this was a monster.
Yeah.
I'll tell you,
Yeah.
it was a monster. And I would be and I don't want to speculate as to the reasons why. But one thing I will tell you, if as a homeowner, kind of understand, if a guy's really close to the end, there's been a series of things that have gone wrong as to why. And I don't know anything about how this deal was originally set up, what the contractor promised, I have no idea on any of that. I can speculate, but I don't want to speculate on my particular situation. But I mean, we've been in other situations, John, where we know we come
Yep.
in, and the original contractor says, hey, I can get it done. I can do it for $10,000, and it's only going to take you 4 days, and 3 months later, and he's at $25,000. Well, I mean, I have a client just that I do a lot of work for, and the guy was doing a whole house remodel, including raising the roof, and he quoted him $100,000. Well, at $300,000 more, and another 2.5 months, and they still weren't finished. Okay, understand, that's like somebody
Right.
that
Of
that was
course.
just a total misquote, or it wasn't a misquote. I consider that to be
Yeah.
virtually bait and switch. Well, what do you want me to do? I just ripped your roof off. You want me to stop? Well, they're not going to
Yeah.
stop.
Right. Right.
And in this particular case, I have no idea what went on. All I know is it
Well,
just didn't sit with me
yeah.
well.
From our perspective, though, we've had pretty much firsthand, experience with, getting close to the end of a job, and then people just not holding up their end of the bargain.
Right, right.
On the homeowner side, or the person who's hiring, and it, I think there's instruments to be put in place, paperwork, contract, and things like that. I think when you get into these big jobs, I mean, we've talked about this before. We go into it later on another show, but from the contract and just protecting yourself from this kind of stuff happening. Now, getting back to touch it, you own it. I think one of the things that occurred, if I look back on one of the things that you and I both worked on a house up at the lake,
Yes. Yep.
and there was a pretty major issue with the floor. And instead of us, from another contractor, had put in a floor. If you recall this, Larry,
Yes, I
and there
do.
was a
Yep.
big hole in the floor
Yep.
where they just where they put this LVP over the top of it, or it was
Over the
click
top of
lock.
the hole. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was not good, and
It
I was
created a
not I
problem.
was not in favor of picking that floor up,
No. Mm-mm.
because I knew that as soon as we touched it, we owned it, and if anything went wrong, that was going to be on us. So luckily he was able to reach the other contractor. This is a long story, but we were brought in to fix some other things up. But you have to be real careful of following up on somebody else's work. So let me go through something that I saw on the boards, on the chat boards and things like that. There are certain jobs that is it going to be a hard no from me. And then might be certain jobs that'll be like, okay, I can fix this, and then have an understanding of I might have to, tear this up. So let me kind of one thing I saw in there was somebody was called in and to fix a shower that a previous contractor had put together, and the curb on the shower was not installed correctly and was starting to come apart.
Yes.
And of course, the one of the questions is, how much do I charge for this? Well, something like a shower
Charge
has
is irrelevant.
long-term consequences. Well, showers can be very complex,
Right.
long-term consequences, and this is definitely you touch it, you own it. And so if you go ahead and take that job, and things go sideways, you got a big problem on your hand, because the homeowner's not going to understand. You might have to, rip that whole thing out. And if they're not agreeable to that and fix it right, then you got to get out of there. And
Yeah.
that was consensus of probably, 150 comments back from in this community of, walk away.
Right.
Do
Right.
not touch that, because this is exactly what's going to happen. Is you will now own that shower. So let's
Yeah.
say that a year from now, well, guess what? Water's leaking around the shower that the guy didn't even know and is rotting out all the joists. Guess who's getting to get the call?
You are. Yeah.
No
And
matter
and
where it happened.
and folks too, so from the homeowner's perspective also on this, I just want to put the homeowner's perspective on that. If you get into a situation like that, you have to make a very, very hard decision. And the hard decision is, do you just patch it up? I mean, literally patch it up, because you could patch that up in a way that would make it waterproof, but you have to start budgeting and thinking, if I have particularly like a tiled shower like what we're talking about
Yes.
here, you're almost into a replacement mode.
The,
You're not going to do a
mm-hmm.
repair, because honestly, probably, I don't know because I didn't see this particular job, and you may never know, really know, but if there's a problem with that, there probably is a problem with the shower pan in
That's
general,
that's
as a
exactly
general
right.
rule of thumb, because bad work is bad work. And it's just a really, it's a sad situation. It's not a, there's nobody's winning here. That's the side of it that we want you to understand. It's why you have to be so careful as a homeowner when you hire people. And it's not just vetting them. We've done 3 shows on hiring a contractor. They're in our archives. They go back to, I believe it's 2020. We'll put these out into the show notes, but a lot of it has to do with communication. A lot of it, you just have to have a feeling for the company. Do they do good work, and will they stand behind it? And those questions are asked. You don't have to be overt with. You can be overt with them, but other questions, you'll get a feeling on people. Are they honest? Are they reputable? Do they care about their image, kind of thing? And as a result of that, those are some of the like how do I want to say it? The hidden things on hiring people. Reviews are great, but reviews can be modified. They can. You can manipulate reviews, and you can make them do. But reviews help.
Mm-hmm.
But read the reviews. Do your due diligence on this sort of thing. How much experience do you have in putting in a shower? For example, a shower. A major expense item, particularly. I mean, I'll give you an example. This fence that was put in, I'm guesstimating it had to be 15 plus $1,000,
Mm-hmm.
just because I was doing some quick. I did 22 sections. This was all pressure treated wood, just the 22, and there were more than 22 sections. I didn't count them all, but of that one wall, 22 times a minimum of 100 to probably more like 150 to $200 per panel, because it was all pressure treat. That boils into being a lot of money just in
Yeah.
materials. And
Yeah.
I wasn't including concrete in the posts, and he concreted everything in. I mean, he really did it right. So it was a substantial investment. And I understand if the deal isn't set up right and people aren't living up to their end of the deal. But again, it gets back to expectations that are set and a lot of different things. And so just when doing these major projects, really be careful. And one other quick comment, and John and I talk about this a ton on this show, but in these inflationary times, if somebody's quoting you materials, boy, I personally like to get a quote like, basically, hey, have material prices changed before you start the work significantly? Because in the past 6 months, 40% is not uncommon increase just in materials. Now, that's just materials. I'm not making excuses for everybody, but I'm making an excuse that's a reality. And a contractor shouldn't be eating the materials, in my opinion.
Right, and
That's
I
my
think you bring
opinion.
up you brought up two good points right there, and that is to be real careful of vetting people. Okay,
Right.
and we do talk about that a lot. References. Reviews are great, but talk to other people. And we've done a bunch of different episodes on this. But just know that if things do go sideways because of that you're going to have a hard time having somebody come in behind it, because of what we're talking about here today.
Yeah. Yep.
Touch it, you own it. Nobody
Yep.
else wants to do that to come up. The second point that you just made is a very valid point, and that is the cost of materials going up quickly. So these longer projects will, if the materials aren't bought in advance, and we've got a lot of friends that in the business. Hey, man, if I can get a hold of your garage, and if I'm going to do a kitchen remodel, I'm going to buy all the materials now and stash
Right.
it, and
Right.
stage that inventory. Now, but that is a good point, because people will get cold feet at the end, because all of a sudden this thing's starting to hockey stick up.
Yeah. Very
The
much so.
cost of this project, and now we're going to get into this contentious realm between the contractor and the homeowner. Well, wait a minute, this thing all of a sudden is starting to go up, and to the other point there you made is, the contractor's not going to eat the material costs.
Well,
Nor should he. He's going to do
he
some,
might,
but
but he
it's not really. You got to look at it from his perspective.
right. Right,
So
exactly. And that's something that and folks, this is kind of, I don't know if it's unique. It's unique right now for sure, because it literally at times has been day to day. Now, not so much quite anymore here. This is October of 2022. So it hasn't been happening as much lately, but boy, in the past 2 years, it's been day to day. I mean, I've seen jumps of $2 and $3 on a single board in 2 days. And when you're talking about 175 feet of boards, that's
yeah,
serious money.
yeah, yeah.
It's like serious money. And again, I don't know how this deal was structured. I don't know anything about what the contractor said to this particular client. All I know, and I have a feeling that he gave her a ballpark range, and then I think that probably it got out of control, because I
and
that's just
and
my
then
opinion. I don't know.
and hence
But
going
anyway,
back to the point that a lot of times you get close to the end of a project, and that's when things come to a complete halt.
yes.
Because all of a sudden now the reality sets in that either it was scope creep, the project got bigger, hence it got more expensive, or inflation took over, and now somebody's gonna get screwed in the deal. So there's that. Okay, there's that side of it. Then there's the bad, some of the bad work side. Let me get like an example I'm thinking of right now. Somebody calls me and says, "Hey, man, somebody hung a door, and it's awful." Well, there's not much risk in that, to go in and fit and straighten up a
Correct.
door. Okay, so
Maybe.
let's just be real. Okay,
Maybe.
the guy just hung the door, and it's not, it's not, it wasn't done right.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you got to pick and choose your battles of what you're going to follow. I mean, we've got friends. I mean, there's, I guess Kevin, right? Chroma. There's
Yeah.
a, there's a free plug for you, Kevin. I mean, if somebody put a deck together wrong in his neck of the woods and called him out, well, these guys are the monsters, man, for doing great deck work. They're going to go out there and tell the homeowner exactly what needs to be done, and figure it out, and fix it,
Yep.
because there won't be much risk, long term risk, if it's done right by somebody who knows what they're doing. So and so another example might be, you need to know where your strengths are as well in this business, and that is, if you're not really good at electrical, pass. Okay.
Yeah.
uh, you
And
know
one of
the
so two points you brought up. I just want to touch on these before I forget them. First one is, you talked about scope creep. And this is from the homeowner side. Folks, if you keep on adding things to the job, your price is going to go up, and the amount of time is going to go up. And while you might think they're not a big deal, it's, you add an hour here, you add an hour there, you add an hour here. Now you're into half a day with just, an hour here, an hour here, an hour there. And folks, it's easy to add days to a job just by things that you think are little. Hey, while you're here, can you X. And I'm not saying it's your fault, but understand it comes at a cost, and the cost is time and money mostly. Um, so be aware of that. The second one you just brought up is having to do with something like electrical, and I want to reference this in terms of code type work. Okay, so if you're not licensed as a contractor to do code work, there's a great example you pulled up. Guy wanted 37 outlets and 20 switches changed out in his house.
Yeah.
And for you and me, right, we've done this kind of stuff all day long. But me, if somebody comes to me and wants to do that, I have to pass on that job, because to me that now is delving into the range of code type work, meaning it's so much, it's not beyond my scope of ability,
Yeah.
but to do it for money, I'm not going to
Yeah. I
do it
mean,
for
I would do it
money.
in my house, but I won't do it in yours.
Correct. Yep.
Um,
Because I'm not a licensed electrician.
exactly, exactly. And you know what? And there's another. You touch it, you own it.
Yes.
You do not know what's lurking behind the walls. You don't know what's upline. You don't know what's downline. You don't know
Correct.
how anybody else performed that. I mean, it's a mystery back there unless you're, ripping all the walls out. But
Right.
it's, it's one of those things where you have to be real, you have to be real careful.
And that goes for both contractors and homeowners.
That's
If
right.
you want to do those kinds of projects, we try to make this show for a little bit for both of our peoples. We have a good handyman section that watches our show, but we also have a lot of homeowners that watch the show or watch and listen to this show as well. And folks, we just want to be clear. Understand there's just some of this stuff, code work in particular. You got to be really kind of careful with it. It's really, you just don't know what's happened in the past. You don't know what materials were used. You just don't know unless you, as John just said, you rip everything apart. And I don't want to do that. It's just not in my wheelhouse. It just gets beyond where I feel comfortable. And again, back to, we talked about when you hire people, if a guy says to you, I'm just not comfortable doing that kind of work, you should be glad as a
Well,
homeowner.
and there's
You
a
should be
great, and that's a,
glad.
yeah, and that's a very valid point, because that's an honest person
Yes.
that's going to tell you like it is. And you want that honesty.
You really do. Yeah, you really do. And to our contractor friends out there, it's the same thing. If you can't do it, just say you can't do it. It's just beyond my capacities. How I ended this fence job was, it was like, it's too much work for me to handle right now because of my scheduling's booked out so far. It just was too much, and my first availability at this point to do that amount of work was past the first of the year, and I just am not comfortable scheduling out that much work out past the first of the year, because again, I can't guarantee a price that's a good 3 months away. Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It just had all the makings
it,
of an
yeah,
unfavorable situation for both of us, for both the
yeah,
customer and myself.
yeah.
And so I had to pass. I just felt it was the only thing that really works. Plus, the job really needed multiple people and so forth and so on. And again, it's just not. It got out of my wheelhouse. I'm just going to leave
Yeah.
it at that, right?
Yeah, no, and no,
So no harm, no foul. Is what it was.
absolutely. And for the younger folks out there doing this stuff, for you, whether you're getting into this handyman thing, there's a lot of work out there, and if you are
There's a ton of
not
work out there.
comfortable, we've talked about this in the past. Find something that you're really good at, keep honing it down, and then move on to the next thing, until you're, well rounded. But if you're not comfortable doing something, actually, you need to admit that to yourself. And if somebody asks you to do something, you say, I'm not comfortable, and have a network of folks. That's what we started out.
Yep.
We made friends with licensed plumbers and electricians, and we call them in and they call us in to do certain things. Great. That's not a bad relationship to have. But
I got a guy, John.
I
I
got
got
a
a guy.
guy,
I got a
and
guy.
it's just, if you're not comfortable, don't do it, because once again, I go back to the beginning of this whole thing. This has been coming up a lot, and it's all about being careful about what jobs that you're willing to take, and the risk that goes along with it, and it goes on both sides. Both sides of the fence on this. No pun intended, Larry.
No
But
pun intended.
it's the homeowner and the contractor / handyman, whoever that might be. But You just have to be aware that as a homeowner, people don't want to come in behind other people to fix their work. So you have to be careful, and you know, you give some folks bad vibes, those contractors might, good ones might say I'm not willing to stick this one out because I've been stiffed before, or you know,
or it's just not going to go.
it's just not, it's going to go
There's a whole
sideways,
ton of
and
yeah. There's
I've
just a
got
ton
better
of reasons.
things to do.
So, John, I have a question for you. When you're taking apart the alien ship, have there ever been these kinds of issues when you're
Well,
taking apart the alien
well,
ship?
I do notice one thing, Larry. It's right behind you. All right, folks.
All right, folks. Signifies the end of the show.
We'll leave you and the alien
as
alone,
we
Larry.
always say,
We'll
if you like
sign
this
off.
show and you like our insanity, please send the links to these shows off to your friends and neighbors. If you have a question, send us an email, questions@handymanprosradioshow.com or at handymanprosradioshow@gmail.com. Either way, we do have a newsletter that you can sign up for on our website. That's handymanprosradioshow.com. And we are on Facebook, and that is at Handyman Pros. So our groups keep growing, and we are trying to put out some good quality stuff. With that, we will see you next week on the Handyman Pros Radio Show.